Welcome to all of you. In the last presentation, we saw the Java programming structure. In that Java programming structure, we saw how the class, variable, constructor, and method, their syntaxes exist, their access specifiers, their modifiers, the return types, parameters, etc. etc. The complete syntax of class, variable, constructor, method, the declarations, and the access specifiers and modifiers we can apply on them and their consequences are all explained in the last videos. And from here after a couple of videos will spend on discussing object oriented programming in Java. Object oriented programming in Java. In short, we call it as OOPS. OOPS in Java. So coming to the OOPS, to implement object oriented programming. To implement object oriented programming, a developer need to follow these five programming principles. These five programming principles. So to develop object-oriented programming, the five programming principles a developer need to follow are: one is encapsulation. Wherever the context comes, we need to understand the context. And as however the encapsulation told us to implement, like that if you implement, your data will be protected. One is encapsulation. Second one is abstraction. Third one is inheritance. Fourth one is polymorphism. And fifth one is message passing. Encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism, message passing. Why we want to learn these programming principles in this pattern? Because encapsulation alone is a separate topic. Encapsulation alone is a separate topic. Apart from encapsulation, there are concepts called the concept like abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism. All the three are individual topics, and as well as in the abstraction, we combine abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism together. To implement abstraction, we need inheritance and polymorphism topic also. So while teaching abstraction, we'll combine inheritance and polymorphism as well, and also we'll have a separate explanation on inheritance and polymorphism. So in the inheritance, all the types of inheritances and types of classes will come. The polymorphism, method overloading and overriding will come. And message passing is the last topic. So we just want to take a brief overview about what encapsulation is, what abstraction is, what inheritance is, what polymorphism is, and what message passing is. We'll discuss briefly and then we'll enter into encapsulation detail. So in the object-oriented programming, the object-oriented programming, the one and only one main construct we will write is a class. In object-oriented programming, we don't write anything without class. Everything inside class. Without class, no program exists in object-oriented programming. It's not like a procedural language where you can write directly function like that. Everything. Variable, you have to declare in class. Constructor, you have to write in class. Methods, you write n number of methods. Write methods in the class. Write static blocks in the class. Write non-static blocks in the class. Write everything inside the class. If not class, then there is only one more other option available to write code, that is interface. Interface is also a pure abstract class. We call it a different name, but pure abstract class is called as interface. That is also a kind of class. Enum contains full of constant variables. That is also a class. So ultimately, in object-oriented programming, we will write everything in a class. So while writing class, we follow these object-oriented programming principles. Object-oriented programming principles. The first principle is encapsulation. What encapsulation says is, encapsulation says you hide the class data. Encapsulation says you hide the class data. Whatever variables you declared inside a class, the non-static variables mostly, forget about static variables and constant variables, okay? I'm talking about non-static variables, or called as instance variables, normal variables, plain variables, which we declare in a class, are called as instance variables. So encapsulation says you always hide your instance variables. You always hide your data. Data means variables. Okay, wait. So data abstraction. What encapsulation does is data abstraction, data hiding, or hiding variables, whatever you call. Encapsulation deals with hiding variables. Abstraction also starts with the same term, hiding. Both encapsulation starts with hiding. Abstraction also starts with hiding. Encapsulation hides the variables. Abstraction hides the method implementations, not methods. Remember, abstraction hides method implementation, but not methods. Method implementations it hides. So we'll see why method implementations need to be hidden. That we'll discuss in the abstraction topic. Abstraction, the process abstraction, hides the method implementation from declaration. Only method, the declaration will be exposed to the client, and the implementation will be completely hidden from the users, from the clients. We may ask many questions why only the method, the declaration is exposed to client, why not the implementation is exposed to client. That anyway we'll discuss in the abstraction topic. Next coming one is inheritance. Deriving a class from another superclass is called as inheritance. So class A, class B extends A, class C extends B, class D extends C. So deriving each class from another superclass is called as inheritance. In the inheritance also we'll discuss so many types of inheritances like single level inheritance, multi-level inheritance, multiple inheritance, composite inheritance, hybrid inheritance. We'll discuss all types of inheritances. But the Java supports only multi-level inheritance but not multiple or other inheritances. So we'll more focus on multi-level inheritance only. But for theory sake, we'll discuss all types of inheritances. And the next in the inheritance topic, mainly we will discuss about the types of classes in Java. Types of classes in Java. How many types of classes exist in Java? So in my classification, the types of classes are: one is interface, pure abstract class, semi-abstract class, a normal class, plain vanilla flower class, plain Java class, final class, inner class, anonymous class, and probably last one is enum. So abstract interface, abstract class, final class, inner class, anonymous class, and enum. So 6 to 7 varieties of classes will write in the Java programming. So each type of class has its own, significance. Abstract class interface are used for runtime polymer to achieve runtime polymorphism. Final is to make its methods unmodifiable. Class is flexible both for inheritance and instantiation. Similarly, inner class and anonymous class and enum, there have each class is having its own significance. So in the entire object-oriented programming, I don't say that this topic is important or this is not important, all are important, but to the developer who is new to write Java programming, to them to understand what are various types of classes exist and how to write them, how to use them, when to use and to not, when not to use these classes. That inheritance topic will help you a lot. But judging which classes right to my situation, to judge that, that inheritance topic will be useful. The next coming to the polymorphism. Polymorphism deals with two things: method overloading and method overriding. Overloading takes place with the same class. Overriding takes place across superclass and subclass. That we will discuss in the polymorphism. And the last one is message passing. Pass by value and pass by reference. So altogether with these five object-oriented principles, we'll implement Java programming. Not only Java programming, every object-oriented programmer will follow the same five object-oriented programming principles. Object-oriented programming principles are different. Object-oriented design principles are different. Object-oriented analysis and design patterns are different. Architectural patterns are different. So and so on. First of all, we'll come to encapsulation. What exactly encapsulation says is, encapsulation says you hide your class data. You hide your class data. You hide your class data Class data means, see, data means nothing but user data. My information like employee one, employee name Suryanarayana, salary, designation, the next department, age, date of birth, martial status, my PAN number, my Aadhaar card, bank account number, my qualifications, my years of experience, my expertise in technology. See, one person, the whole personal, professional, academic, the whole data is called as a data. So, in the class where we will store the data, we'll store the data into variables, isn't it? In class where the data is stored, in class the data is stored in variables. So, we don't hide the data, we hide the variable so that indirectly the data stored inside the variable will be hidden. So, in class, because we'll declare variables in which we'll store various users' information, various users' data, we'll first of all hide the variables. If variables are hidden, if they are made unaccessible, the data cannot be unaccessible. Okay. So, if I hide the variable, and why we need to hide the variable, that we'll see, and how to do it also we'll see later on. So if you hide the variable, suppose if you write a class employee and declare employee ID, employee name, salary, designation, four variables you declared as private. Finish. Private int employee ID, private string employee name, private double salary, private string designation. Four variables you declared as private. And just close the class. Write class with four variables, declare all four variables as private. Suppose if you do, then what is the use of writing employee class, and what is the use of declaring those variables if the variables are inaccessible outside the class? Then who can access those variables? Only that class, only that class members can access. Only that class members can access those private variables. Only that class members means in a class other than variable, what are the other members available in a class? Constructors exist, methods exist. Okay. So if in class variables are declared as private, in a class, if variables are declared as private, its class members, means that means its constructors and methods written in the same class can access those variables, but outsiders cannot access those variables. That is the point. Okay, very good. So then if the outsiders want to access those variables, suppose if you want to allow others to have a limited access on modifying your variables or retrieving your variables, how do you do that? Or if you want to completely hide the variables only within your class and only your class methods want to access them, that also you can do. We'll see two different varieties of examples. First of all, you declare variables as private and you want to give limited access of your variables to others, maybe for modifying your variables or to retrieve your variables, to access your variables. So based on that, you have to decide which type of methods you want to write. So, along with declaring variables as private, along with declaring variables as private, private int employee, along with declaring variables as private, for each variable in such encapsulation class, for each variable, we need to write one pair of setter method and getter method. We need to write one pair of setter method and getter method. Also, these two methods are called as a mutator method and a accessor method. Mutator method means mute means changing. Mutator method means method which can change that variable value is called as mutator method. Accessor method means method which can access that variable is called as a accessor method. So for the int employee ID variable, we'll write one mutator method and accessor method. Set EID, int EID. Similarly, get EID without any parameter. We'll mention that in this int. For this, we'll write it as void. So for each private variable, if you write one pair of setter method and getter method like this. So how to write setter method? You write set keyword in small letter. And the starting letter of every variable must be converted into capital letter. Set EID, E capital letter. And the remaining case of the variable is same, ID small letter. And in the setter method is meant for the outsider to modify our class employee variable. So outsider can pass employee value into this setter method. If you write setter method as public void set employee, so then outsiders can modify the data. And similarly, if you write one getter method, public int get EID, and if you user invokes this method, if user invokes this method, user will get the employee value. And with the help of set employee method, the outsider can modify the variable. Using the getter method, the outsider can access the variable. So remember, first of all, we made the data is private. First of all, we hidden the data. Second, and in hidden instance, like we made inaccessible the data. And based on the requirement, you can write a pair means two, a pair of one setter method and one getter method for each variable. Please follow this type of, this is called as Java Bean naming convention or camel case convention. Java Bean naming convention. Java Bean naming convention is write set or get keyword in small letter and change the starting letter of the every variable into capital letter and maintain the remaining case of the variable as same. So this is called as Java Bean naming convention. So like that, if you maintain Java Bean naming convention and write one pair of set and getter method for each private variable, the variable can be both allowed for modification from outside and as well as accessing from outside. Then where is the security, you may ask me? Do one thing. Don't provide setter method to the employee variable. Then outsiders can only access your variable but cannot modify the variable. Or otherwise you provide only setter method, don't provide getter method. Only outsiders can modify your variable, cannot access your variable. Cannot retrieve your variable, the variable value. Don't write both setter and getter method. Your variable can neither be modified nor can be accessed from outside the class. Otherwise, you provide both setter and getter method. The variable can be both modified and as well as accessible from outside. See? So by deciding whether to provide outsiders to access our variables, provide setter method. If you want to provide, accessing permissions to others, you provide getter method. So that is how you decide whether you want to provide setter method or getter method to each private variable. That is how you can encapsulate the data. First of all, we declared variable as private. First of all, we secured variable by declaring it as private. Then later on, we'll think of whether we want to provide a setter method or getter method, both or not. That you can decide later on. We'll see with an example of what happens if I don't, declare variable as private. If I don't provide a setter and getter method, what happens? So it is a way of restricting the access of our data members by other classes. It is a way of restricting the access of our data members by other classes. That's what. Encapsulation encapsulates data or variables under a single unit. It combines the data, private variables, and behavior. Behavior means methods. Method, function, behavior, algorithm, processor. These are all similar terms. Algorithm, and all. These are all similar terms. So data means variables, behavior means method. So it combines both the data and the private variables and behavior, the public setter getter methods on those variables together into one class is called as what? Encapsulation. It is a way of restricting the access of our data members by other classes. Okay. We'll come to these points anyway. Here is one small example. On what if I don't do the encapsulation. What happens if I don't do encapsulation? The consequence, actually, this problem arises when before object-oriented programming, before the classes are introduced, the one major evolution in the from procedural programming to these kind of class programming is structure programming in C. And in between procedural programming and object-oriented programming, one more programming type of programming introduced in C programming language called structure programming, in which the same. And the concept of previously when in the procedural language, We used to write functions separately, we used to write variables separately. Maybe under a single .c program, under a single C program, we may declare variables separately, we may write a function separately. So we don't combine both those variables, and these functions belong to same unit. For example, you'll declare employee variables, followed by you'll write some 5 to 6 functions to manipulate those employee variables. Similarly, you'll write one more C program. You'll declare some customer related variables, customer ID, customer name, email, mobile, customer credit card, his shipping address, billing address, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. Customer past, purchase experiences, his interested products, and the time he wished to do the shopping. Those customer related data variables you'll declare in one C program, followed by 5 to 10 functions you'll write. But nowhere you will mention that these functions and these variables belong to a single unit. Maybe variables and functions may exist in one C program, but we don't tell that these two combined together wants to act as one single unit. So in the C programming, that is what they realized that okay, anyway, the variables we are declaring, and those variables are intended to be manipulated or accessed or printed or modified or happen something by these methods on those variables. So why can't we combine both these related variables and related functions? Combinedly together, we can encourage developers to write it in a single unit. That is how they made it into one structure. Structure is all related variables and related functions combined together into one structure. But in the structure, these object-oriented programming principles are not there, like encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism. For the encapsulation, first of all, access specifiers are required: private, public, protected. These access specifiers are there. So in structure, there is no encapsulation concept. They are completely new to combining variables and functions. So they don't have any idea on how to secure the data of the structure. Simply, if anybody creates object of the structure and access the variables, it will be accessed. If anybody calls a function, the functions will be called. So there is no protection to the member variables of a structure. That is how the concept called the class came in object-oriented programming to protect the data members and then nothing but variables of a class. Variables are encapsulated, hidden, and methods will be exposed to the client. So because when data is exposed through method, we can do something that we'll discuss now. For example, if you take employee class, there is no encapsulation here. We simply declared one public class employee, and we declared 4 variables: employee ID, employee name, salary, and designation of different types: int, string, double string types. 4 variables we declared. 4 variables, if you declare normally without prefixing with the access specifier in Java, these variables are called as default access specifier variables. Default access specifier variables. Default access specifier. That means this class, though class is the combination is wrong. See, public class with a default access specifier variables. A public class without package declaration, or package declared without public declaration, is of no use. Under no use access specifier public here, but just casually as a part of the we were habituated to write every class is public class hello. Right from the follow program, we started writing classes as public. That is how, as a part of the habit, we wrote classes public class employee, but don't feel any special significance about this access specifier. It's of no use. Class employee. In the class, we declared employee name, salary, and designation. So that what is the scope of these four variables? These 4 variables can be accessed anywhere within the package. Access anywhere within the package. How a class can be used within the package? Within the package or outside the package? The class can be used only in 2 ways. One is by doing inheritance. Second one is by doing instantiation. Either do inheritance or instantiation. If you do inheritance, to the existing class you add extra methods, or you modify the existing methods you override in your class. If you instantiate the class, you access variables and functions of the class. And whether you want to use a class or you want to enhance the class. Think like that. Whether you want to use the functionality of the existing class or you want to enhance the functionality of the existing class. If you want to enhance the functionality of the existing class, go for inheritance. If you want to use the functionality of a class, go for instantiation. Simple. So within the package or outside the package or outside the system, a class can be used only in two ways. That's it. So within the package, within the directory, because there is no package, within the directory, in any other class, this class can be instantiated and these variables can be directly accessed. They can be modified, they can be accessed, retrieved, and displayed. See, here is example. I'm writing employee client, one public static void main method. I created object of employee with employee object dot employee variable, employee name variable, salary variable, and designation variable are directly accessed and to which the values are assigned. One A, B, C, 1 lakh, and all. This type of programming exists usually in the structured programming because in the structured programming there is no encapsulation to the data. System.out.println e.employee. Here I am modifying the data, here I am accessing the data. So where is the protection? Where is the protection to the data of a class? Because once if something is stored inside a class, it should be highly protected. It shouldn't be accessed by the outsiders. A lot of business applications store lots of confidential data that even the same author of the class also cannot access. Even in the bank, without our authentication, they cannot see our bank balance also. They cannot see our past, transaction history also. Sometimes, in some cases. So where is the protection to the data? And here is one text file written. One ampersand ABC, 10,000 designer, 2 XYZ, $20,000 per 3 element, 30,000 tester, 4 PQR, 40,000 analyst. Like that, 4 employees data I have written in one .txt file called employee.txt. We are going to try to access this employee.txt data in the next coming program, in the next coming class. So instead of using table, I use simple .txt file. If it is a database, I should show it in a different representation that I can show. But programming cannot be as simple as reading a data from file. For the database, we need to write some extra code using JDBC API. So that is how, whether it may be a text file or whether it may be a database, what are the other sources exist to store the data. You can store the data in a text file. We can store the data in a XML file. We can store the data in a JSON file, JavaScript object notation format. XML, JSON are the two most frequently used format to store and move the data across the web. Most of the web applications will use either XML or JSON. Currently, mostly the data is stored and passed on from one machine to another machine through a JSON format. We can store data into file, we can store data into XML, we can store data into JSON. Sometimes we can store the data into PDF for read only and directly to take a printout and to display the report. We can write it into PDF files. There are various data sources. You can write it into database, like any SQL database like Oracle or MySQL or SQL Server. You can write it into NoSQL databases like MongoDB, Cassandra, like various other databases. Sometimes we won't write the data into cloud databases. So the data may persist within the machine or outside the machine or over the network on the cloud. It may be simple text file format or maybe some more structured format like XML or JSON or more complicated format like a database. However, the data is stored somewhere. We want to access it. If it is a normal Java class in which variables are declared without any access, like private, those variables can be directly accessed or modified from anywhere outside the class. There is no protection to the member variables of the class. This is the production of the data is the main criteria here. So then what to do? So if you want to restrict accessing the data, what you do is, here I wrote one employee class. Class employee, you observe I declare all the four variables as private. All the four variables as private. In object-oriented programming, something like this, some symbol will be shown to represent that these members are private and a lock. If it is unlocked, it's something look like this. Okay. So I don't know exact representation of private or default protected public. So private data. So that means these variables can be accessed only within the members of a class, but not outside the members. Okay, private int employee name, salary designation. So if at all, if you write a class with private variables, what are the other things you need to do is, you can write a required number of constructors. So suppose if at all, if I give you a class with couple of variables and asks you to write the number of constructors, how many maximum number of constructors you may possibly write? And you can write a number of constructors. There is no condition that these many constructors you can write. But usually, how many number of constructors do you write? In my view, we can write one no parameter constructor, one primary key field passed as a parameter, and with employee by passing as a parameter, we'll write one constructor, one single parameter constructor, primary key as a parameter constructor. Take here in Java, here in programming, we don't have primary key, but one field we should identify as a primary key field or unique field, ID field. Otherwise, if not primary key field, ID field. Okay. The next one no parameter constructor, one single parameter constructor, one essential parameters constructor, one all parameters constructor. 4. So in the previous videos also I have discussed, I think in the constructor somewhere I have discussed about these 4 types of constructors. Possibly if we are interested, we'll write these 4 varieties of constructors. No parameter, single parameter, essential parameters, and all parameters constructors. So writing constructors is completely your choice. Suppose if you provide no parameter constructor, suppose others want to create object of your class. EMP E1 is equal to new EMP of no argument constructor. They cannot pass any data here. Nothing will come here. Nothing will be changed here. The data remains, and all in this no parameter constructor, all the variables are initialized with the default value. Int to 0, employee name to null because it's a string, it's a class, and salary to 0.0, and designation again to null. Default values will be assigned, and with the help of E1 dot, you cannot access anything because variables are private. You are not passing any data into constructor. You are not passing any arguments. Nothing will be changed. Just employee objects will be created with all the variables initialized with the default values. Good to hear. And suppose if you write employee class with the 4 parameter constructor. So if I want to create employee object, employee E1 is equal to new employee of. I can pass employee name, salary, designation, 4 arguments. All the 4 arguments will go here. Each argument will be assigned to, each argument will be assigned to one class instance variable. So each of these parameter is being assigned to class instance variable by differentiating the class instance variable and constructor parameter with this keyword. This keyword is used to differentiate the current class instance variables from constructor parameters. If both are clashed, if both are same, both are different, you can assign with different names. Similarly, employee name, salary, and designation. So whatever data user passes with the data, an employee object is created. If you are interested, you provide parameter constructor. That is also your own choice. The writing that I'm showing, these many things we can write, but whether you want to write parameters constructor or not, no parameter. If you don't write any constructor, one default constructor will be provided by Java compiler at the name of compilation, and that there is no doubt. Next, to give access to these variables, first of all, we declared variables as private. Now we want to give access to these variables from outside the class. From the client, we want to give access. What do you do? Suppose if employee object is created with no argument, so employee E1 is equal to new employee. And first of all, you allow outside classes to instantiate your class, and you provide a separate setter method and getter method for each variable. To whichever variable you, whether you want to provide an access to that variable, or you want to allow others to modify the variable, that you decide, and based on that you give setter methods and getter methods. So I want to allow user to pass employee ID into my class. Set employee ID of 1. So that value will come to this setter method. So for the employee ID, I'm writing public void set EID, same Java bean naming convention. Int employee ID is the parameter. I'm assigning employee ID parameter to class instance variable. Now, after creating employee object, whatever value employee ID passes argument by the client, that value will come here. Right? E1 dot. Suppose if you provide setter method for employee name, salary, and designation also, then outsiders can write set employee name, set salary, set designation, like that. Set salary, set employee name, set salary, set designation. Like that. But if you carefully observe the program, for the employee ID, we provided both setter and getter method. But for the employee name, salary, and designation, we provided only getter method but not setter method. That means outside classes can only access employee name, salary, and designation, but cannot modify employee name, salary, and designation. Only employee ID can only be set by the others. Employee name and salary designation can be only accessed but not modified by outside classes. So this is how we encapsulate. You don't provide getter method for employee name, salary, and designation. They are completely protected. You provide setter methods for employee name, salary, and designation. They can be accessed and modified by others. See, by providing setter and getter method, we are having every privilege to completely restrict the variable, or you want to partially restrict the variable, or you want to give full permissions of the variable to access from outside. Everything you can do. And one more thing, while providing these setter methods, if you directly give access to the variable, variable can be accessed to e1.ead is equal to something. If you provide through setter method, there is one more advantage there. By providing setter and getter method, you can allow others to modify the variable or access the variable, that you can do. And second advantage of accessing to modify the variable through a setter method is one more advantage with setter method is, while calling the setter method, we can internally check if user is authenticated. And generally in every business application, whenever we start the application, whenever we launch the application, we'll first of all ask the username and password. Whether he's an admin or an employee or a student or student parent, even in the college application or in the outside applications, first of all we'll ask username and password. We'll do the authentication first. We'll verify username and password. If username and password is correct, then we'll recognize who he is or who she is. Whether she is an admin or employee or a student or staff or a teaching staff or non-teaching staff or a parent or an outside vendor. So we'll check who this user is. If username and password is correct, then we'll, based on their role, based on their type of user, we give authorization. And with that authorization, they can modify the data in our system, or they can access the data in our system, or they can do both or none. So authorization is one, authentication is the entry point to get into the system. Based on the authorization, based on the privileges, authorization is nothing but based on the privileges or permissions given to the user can make use of the system. So if setter method is called, see, client is calling setter method in contrast with directly accessing the variable. If directly variable is accessed, nothing you can check. You cannot check anything. But if user access e1.setTid, user don't know. He just feel like that he is calling set employee method and passing employee, that value is going into employee class. But internally in the method, inside the method, we'll check whether user is authenticated or not. If not, user is not authenticated, else we'll call authenticate method. And suppose without authentication, suppose if he suddenly comes into this class and try, and employee ID can be set only by the employees who are having permission to access the system, like other employees, but not the students and parents. For example, if he is not authenticated, we'll ask him to authenticate. The authenticated user also, if belongs to admin or employee only, will give authorization to call this method. If he is an employee, a student, or a student parent, we don't give. We simply say you are authenticated, but you are not authorized to access our company data. Like that, you can do lots of things in the setter method. If it is a method, you can do a lot of things apart from taking the argument into employee ID method. If it is a method, if it is not a method, if it is a direct access to the variable, you cannot do all this stuff. So this is how the encapsulation will do a lot. See here, to the employee ID, I gave both setter method and getter method. But to the employee name, salary, and designation, I gave only getter methods. Why? Because I am writing this encapsulated class in such a way that anybody can instantiate my class. They can ask whichever employee. Suppose I want to find out some so-and-so employee is working in our organization or not. By name or by employee ID, we'll check whether this employee is working or not. Yeah, employee or not. So how can I check? I'm not having permission to modify the other employees, but I can check whether that so-and-so employee by ID or by name or by mobile number or by email ID. I want to find out whether that employee is available or not. I just want to inquire. I think I want to do any modification. I just want to casually inquire about whether that employee is available. So what should I do? Event.set employee. Finish. So employee was set into employee class. Into this class instance. Then we want to fetch that employee data. So in this class, after completion of these getter methods, here setter getter method for employee ID, only getter method for employee name, salary, and designation. And the employee name, salary, designation can be only accessed but cannot be modified. Remember. And along with this, I am writing one more function inside this class called retrieve employee. So what is retrieve employee method? In the retrieve employee method, I am doing what I am doing in the retrieve employee method. In the retrieve employee method, I am doing simple. Here, employee data is already there in employee.txt file, isn't it? I want to check whichever employee ID the user has requested. I want to check whether that employee information exists in this text file. If not text file, maybe in a database or somewhere, XML, JSON. I told you, so many data sources are there. In the retrieve employee method, I want to check whether the user requested employee ID and that corresponding employee ID exists in the file or database or not. If exists, we'll retrieve the remaining data. We'll give that data. We'll expose the data to the client. We'll give the data to the client. If the client requested employee ID doesn't exist in any of these employees' data, then finally we'll display an error message saying that the requested employee ID is not found in our database. Simple. So for that, what I'm doing, I wrote one user-defined function called retrieve employee. Remember, always it's a good habit of writing a method. Even in the previous Java programming structure also, while explaining about the method syntax, I've explained this. Whenever you are writing a method, a good developer must always make a habit of declaring one variable same as the written above the method. And that variable must be mentioned as a written statement at the end of the method. If you're working on a notepad, the experience is different from when you're working on a IDEs like Eclipse or NetBeans or JDeveloper or any other Java integrated development environment. Whenever you write a method with some int, public int, add int a comma b, just you open floor bases and close start, then immediately the data will show error saying that you did the big mistake. What big mistake you did? Because you mentioned method written type as int, but inside the method body you forgot to write a written statement with the same data type as a written statement. And in the IDE, you will immediately experience that if you don't write a statement of a method, it continuously, prompts the error. It doesn't forces or stops or do anything, but it continuously gives an error. Red mark will be provided saying that this written statement is missing, written statement is missing. Even if such errors comes, whenever you write any class which is there on other package, those classes cannot be imported, if there is any error in the program, suppose if you want to use some list class or map class or set class of util package, you will directly check, because we are working on the IDE, we just write list is equal to new array list. But if you press Ctrl Shift over and do anything shortcut to try to import the packages, they will not be imported because you are committed a mistake in the program. If you resolve the error, then import statements will be imported. So there is one big problem with the IDEs. In Notepad, you don't experience that. Whenever you write a method written up as Boolean, with that same type, you must declare one local variable inside the method. That should be the first statement. And that variable must be written as a written statement at the end of the method. These two must be done for every method. Methods who are having a written type. Method written type is what? Tool. You can keep it. You need not have to write this. If written type is area or boolean or char or string or float or double, with that type you declare one local variable. That variable you write as a written statement at the end of the method. First of all, you do these two and then next come to the method implementation. It is one of the good practice of programming. Then in the java.io package, there is one class exists with the name called random access file. With this random, actually there are two types of files exist in java.io package. One is file input stream, which is called as a sequential stream, and second one is a random access file. With file input stream, you can continuously read line by line of data from the file, but you cannot stop at a point and next time you can start reading from that point, or you can skip these many number of bytes in the file, or you can move to end of the file. You cannot do all this. Every time a file input stream named class java.io package will start at the beginning of the file to till end of the file. It will continuously reads byte by byte or line by line. So file input stream is not that flexible for reading, and reading you can't do. Reading you have to write with another class called file output stream. That too from the beginning of the file. You can't write or modify anything in the middle of the file. So users who want to continuously read the complete file, they'll use file input stream, file output stream. But a person like me, I want to read a particular part of the file, but not a complete file. So I'll go for random access file. In the random access file, the two arguments are: one is which file you want to read and in which mode you want to read. I'm interested to read employee.txt. Which mode? I'm interested to read in edit mode. Okay, good. Okay. The next, so random access file is open. So from that random access file, I retrieve first line. So if I read the first line, this first line will be read. This first line. Once after getting this first line, I'm checking while line is not equal to null. This while loop will execute as long as line is not null. So how long this while loop will execute? As far as this text file is concerned, the lines will be read for 1, 2, 3, and 4 times. 4 times the lines can be read. 5th time if you try to read, because there is no existence of the line, 5th line here, null value will be assigned to the readline method. To this readline method. 4 times readline method will contain not null value. 5th time the readline method returns null value to line variable. So here I'm checking if line is not null. So what is the separator used between the values in this file? Employee name, salary designation, ampersand. With the ampersand, that whole line want to be splitted, we use string to organizer. st is equal to new string to organizer. We pass a line and ampersand symbol. What happened? The complete line will be splitted with ampersand symbol. Employee name, salary, and designation will be splitted as 4 tokens. With ampersand symbol, they will be separated as 4 tokens. So string tokenizer now contains 4 tokens. So the first token is, so using string tokenizer dot next token method, if you call, each next token method will return one token from the string tokenizer. First attempt of the next token will return employee ID, but it will be returned as a string. How to convert string to int? Integer dot parse int. Take that into one temporary employee ID variable. Temporary employee ID variable because not employee ID variable because we already declared employee ID as a class instance variable. So here we are checking if client requested employee ID through this method and the employee variable coming from the file. If both matches, if both matches if both matches read the remaining tokens, assign values to employee name, salary and designation. Flag to true, flag to true. Finally we'll check flag is true or false to indicate that the record is found and called break. So what break does, because the moment record is found, we want to stop reading the remaining, lines of data from the file, because my required record is already found. So how should I break the loop? Break keyword breaks the loop. Continue skips the current iteration of the loop. So break breaks the loop. So simply the reading will break. If record is found, if employee is found, if employee is not found, this complete if condition will be skipped. The read line will execute once again. One more time, line is null or not. Again tokenize. Read the first token, check the employee ID. If not found, read next line, and so on. If found, simply assign the values to employee name, salary, and designation variables. And here I'm checking if flag value is equal to false. Flag value is false means what does it mean? The client requested record is not found in our database. So employee record which shows employee is not found. That is how we close if condition. And we close the try catch block. And in the Java programming, whenever we use these APIs like IO API, networking API, and other APIs, we need to handle exceptions. Exceptions will discuss later on. Checked exceptions must be handled with the try catch block that we are doing. And finally, the flag statement is written. Flag statement if comes true comes, record is found. If false, record is not found. See here, E1 dot client will call retrieve employee method. And he passes employee ID, which our employee is searching for, and he calls retrieve employee method that will go and read the data from the database text file. The next, if it is true, we'll take it into flag variable. If flag, that means if record is found, we'll call E1 dot get employee name, get salary, get designation. Remaining getter methods will call if the record is found. If the record is not found, we'll keep it. We'll simply exit. We don't call this getter method. So in this example, we allowed users to only set the employee ID and only get the employee name, salary, and designation. But these employee name, salary, designation cannot be modified by others. So is this one type of encapsulation example, and we can discuss a lot. This is about only setter and getter methods. Apart from setter and getter methods, in this program, if you write the CRUD operations respective to this employee, CRUD operations means create, read, update, delete. That means in the database terminology, insert record, retrieve record, update record, and delete record. So if you want to perform CRUD operations on this employee data into employee table, if you want to store, retrieve, update, and delete this employee data to one from employee table, you can add extra methods called same employee, update employee, delete employee, find all employees, find employee by name, find employee by designation, find employee by salary, like etc. etc. All database related functions you can add into the same class with private variables, public setter getter methods, and with these save, update, delete, find all, delete methods. If you include, if you write only private variables in setter getter methods, this class can be called as Java bean or a Pojo plain old Java object. If you combine with these CRUD operation methods, then immediately this class will become a DO, data access object. Data access object is a class in which we do all CRUD operations on a specific entity. So you can further extend this encapsulation by adding some database interaction functions. You can make this Java bean promoted as a data access object also. And that when we come to next topics like somewhere in JDBC, Hibernate, when we come to those topics, we'll discuss about all this DOS. This is all simple. You take the employee ID from the user, create employee object, take employee ID from the user, scanner.nextInt, set the employee ID into employee object, call retrieve employee method, bool value come, if bool value is true, retrieve remaining data, else keep it. That's it. This is briefly about encapsulation topic. Here it ends. Encapsulation topic ends. In the next topic, we will discuss, abstraction. Abstraction is a very, very big topic. So that we will see it in the next session. Until then, thank you. Bye.
Like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.